So one time after a Muay Thai practice, I was talking to my teammate who's an amateur champion, and she told me if I had one piece of advice, I would say don't tear your ACL. And I've been around many ACL tears from my time as a football player and now in martial arts. And ACL tears suck more than the average injury because the recovery time is so long. And it is very expensive with things like the surgery, buying the crutches, and any other equipment you need. Also, usually have to take time off work. And also, it's not just one doctor's appointment, you have many to go to through this process. And probably the thing that sucks the most is that when you tear one ACL, you're much more likely to tear the other one. Now, there's many things you could do to prevent ACL tears with things like stability and balance exercises. Also, making sure you have proper alignment. Faraz Zahabi explained this best, but he was like, when a chair is straight, it means all the weight is on its bones, or in this case, the chair leg. But if a chair is kind of like this, it means all the weight is on the joints. That's why having good posture is so important, so your bones are properly aligned. But one of the easiest things you could do that will also go a long way is just making sure you have strong hamstrings. And not just making sure your hamstrings are strong, but making sure your hamstrings are strong when being compared to your quad. That's because your quad pulls your tibia forward, and then your hamstrings are responsible for pulling it back or counteracting it. So if your quads overpower your hamstrings, your ACL is at risk. Louis Simmons, who's a famous powerlifting coach, and he's also trained many athletes like MMA fighters and NFL players, and he just influenced strength training for all sports as a whole. But he said the ratio should be 60% hamstring strength, 40% quad strength. Of course, unless you're Ivan Drago surrounded by 20 sports scientists in the underground Russian basement, there's no way to get your exact amount of strength on each muscle group. But this is just a general area to shoot for. But there's two kinds of hamstring exercise you need to do to include in your routine. The first one is hip extension, which gets trained through all squatting and hinging movements, which if you do combat sports or any sport, you should really already be doing. But the second one is something I think a lot of people don't do, and that's knee flexion. You probably already know what I'm talking about, but basically if your leg is an arm, it's just training the curling movement or the flexing movement of your leg. But there's infinite amount of hamstring exercises, but today I'm just going to share with you three of my favorites. The first one is doing a glute bridge and then curl on a stability ball. This is probably my favorite one because it trains hip extension and knee flexion all in one exercise, along with working on your stability. And if you could do it, you're working on your single leg strength also. But if you've never done this before, you probably won't be able to do it first time. So the regression to this exercise is doing it with your arms on the floor and with both legs. And if you don't have a stability ball, another good exercise that's really similar is doing a glute bridge on a foam roller. Again, do this single leg if you can. I know this exercise looks really easy, but the first time you do it, there's actually a good chance you might cramp. So do it double leg at first, and if that's easy, change to single leg, and that will be much harder. The second thing is a hamstring curl with a band. And I really like working out with a band, especially as an athlete, because in sports, you don't just want to lift something up and then let momentum take over, like when you're lifting a weight. You actually want to lift it and then have to keep pushing through, which is what the band makes you do, because the longer you push it or the longer you pull it, the harder it gets. And it also has a stability element to it, because when you lift it, the weight is constantly changing. On the concentric, it will tighten up. And on the eccentric, it gets looser and looser and you have to control it. And there's many ways to hook it up, but my favorite way is to do it from a pull-up bar. And when you do this, you want to try and make sure your knees stay in about the same place throughout the movement. Also, another thing I like about the band is that it's much cheaper than the hamstring curl machine. The third one is a Nordic hamstring curl. Now, unless you're in the 0.0001% of athletes, if you're going to do this exercise, you're going to need some assistance. The best case scenario is if your gym has an assisted Nordic machine, but I've been to many gyms in my life and only two have had this machine. They're getting a tiny bit more popular, but very few gyms have this. So if you don't, you could just put a heavy barbell and attach a foam pad underneath and then have your knees on the foam pad and then hook up a band to a pull-up bar and do it that way. But there's tons of different hamstring exercises you could do. Just to list some, there's glute ham raises, there's Romanian deadlifts, there's single leg Romanian deadlifts. There's hamstring curls with the band in different variations like lying down or seated. There's the single leg variation in all of those hamstring curl exercises also. So it is really something for another video. And I have a theory that I'm pretty confident in why people don't train their hamstrings as much as their quads. And that's because you don't really see the hamstrings in the mirror. But you know what they say, it's one thing to look like a strong, capable man, and it's another thing to be one. And not only will having a strong hamstring prevent injuries, but you'll be a stronger, more explosive, more stable athlete too. And it will help in literally any sport that you do. And even when it comes to lifting, all your lifts will increase also. But eventually, I want to have something where I take care of this whole process for you when it comes to program design, exercise selection, and making sure you're doing the right technique. So stay tuned for that. But here's another video you might like. And if you're new to this channel, my goal is to help you with your fitness and martial arts goals. So subscribe if you think this channel will help you. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.